All right, so if you've watched my channel in any way, shape, or form, you know that I absolutely love PvP in Guild Wars 2. It is fast, it's fun, there's like some crazy good rewards that you can get from it, yet it seems that there is a negative connotation when it comes to PvP in this game. And this might, in fact, actually come across as a negative thing to new players.
Why would you say something so controversial yet so brave?
And with this being one of the key endgame modes in Guild Wars 2, it really begs the question, why does nobody like PvP in Guild Wars 2? All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at this from a few different perspectives so that we can kind of wrap our head around the current state of PvP. And the first look that I want you to view it from is from that new player experience. And let's be serious, straight out the gate, if you join any game that already has an established PvP community, everything is going to be moving very fast.
Wanna see me run to that mountain and back?
Players have had years and years to hone their skills and their reflexes to be able to be very good at the game. And then the new player comes in and gets absolutely roasted from 16 different angles.
What did he say?
These veterans are pulling off combos, nearly one-shotting other players, and absolutely dominating the game. And the new players are just struggling to get by. That new player steps out into that match and gets blindsided by a willbender at Mach 10, and then they wonder why they decided to even step foot into this game mode. Now, again, let me state that this is not anyone's fault in particular. You can't blame the veteran who has put a lot of hours into a game that they love, in playing a game mode that they very much enjoy, and put up against another player. You can't blame them for being good at the game. And then on the other side, you can't really blame the new player who is just trying to figure out what the heck is going on and try to understand how to play this game mode. The unfortunate byproduct of this interaction between this veteran and this new player is that the new player isn't necessarily going to be too keen on joining into a game mode where all they do is lose. Now, this is of course the problem with competitive play, is that you do have to start somewhere. There is a learning curve no matter what game you play. A lot of players, especially a lot of new players, aren't necessarily interested in spending that much time in PvP just because, well, I can spend my time doing other things where I do win, where I do get that satisfaction of, we'll say, achieving something, getting a reward, completing a map meta, doing something for my character, and instead of being gray screened every 5 seconds. Now, to be sure, this isn't the case for everyone. Some players, and I include myself in that group, understand that I'm going to suck at a certain game mode for a while until I figure it out.
Dude, sucking at something is the first step towards being sort of good at something.
And I have that, we'll say, stubbornness to give something up. Now, I know that there are quite a few players who share that same sentiment with me, who understand that, again, I will eventually get better. It might take some time and it might take a lot of losses, but eventually I'll get to a competent standpoint that I can handle myself in any game mode, specifically player versus player. But a lot of players come into Guild Wars 2 with the idea that it is more of a casual game. So if it is a more casual game, then why am I going to spend my time with something that might have a negative connotation to it? Why not go in and enjoy myself in a map meta, get some rewards, and log off for the night? I'm not saying either side is right. I am saying this is simply what it's like. Now, I have thought of a solution for this particular problem, for this new player experience who are stepping into the game mode and getting blasted by everyone. Now, the matchmaking in Guild Wars 2 is a little touchy. Sometimes you'll be playing against a whole team where you absolutely wreck them and you are a god, and then the next you are playing against literally the top players in the game. There's no real ebb and flow. But the idea is that with your PvP rank, what level you are, you can only play players who are either 5 above or 5 below where you currently are. That way it creates a little window where they are capable of playing the PvP game mode and be able to have competitive play against other players who are of similar skill levels. Now, of course, on paper that sounds fantastic. That seems like a very simple, easy solution for everyone to enjoy. New players aren't necessarily getting thrown into the gauntlet, and veteran players are actually up against higher skilled or similarly skilled players. However, there is a contradiction to this problem, which is, of course, that if you do that, you're dividing the already somewhat smaller PvP community even further. Now, there isn't necessarily enough players to have easy queue times, or we'll say fast queue times. Things will slow down significantly. There's a few problems with that, given the amount of players who regularly play PvP. The other aspect of Guild Wars 2 PvP, and I think is something that is severely lacking across the game, but it is very apparent in player versus player, is the lack of tutorials. The lack of just really good, this is the basics of player versus player. These are the stats that you should be paying attention to. These are the boons, these are the conditions, these are the stun breaks, this is what stability is. The real in-depth tutorial to explain what the heck is going on. Now, I will say that does give content creators quite a bit of work to do, so it's a good thing for us. However, until I make that video, or even if someone watches that particular video, they might still be struggling. And that's also kind of my point, is that if there were better tutorials in-game where players don't have to seek outside sources about these particular endgame modes, then I feel like PvP would be a lot more palatable. It doesn't necessarily fix the previous problem where everyone's flying around at 100 miles an hour, but it does make an easier entry for players to start to enjoy this game. That's what we want, right? I mean, when I first started PvP, I didn't know really what the heck I was doing. I was just putting builds together and doing my best. Now, sometimes I did really good, other times I did really bad, and it took me a while to really realize what I was doing different, kind of the learning process. And again, I stress that I'm stubborn. When I put my mind to something, I'm going to figure out a way to do it. I know quite a few players don't share that same sentiment, and that's okay. It's a game. It's meant to be enjoyed. However, it makes it harder for them to transition into this endgame mode, specifically looking at new players. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the balance in Guild Wars 2 PvP. This is something that has popped up quite a few times, not only in comments, not only on live stream, but just in various places that I've seen. Players really feel that it's incredibly unbalanced. And I can understand to a degree why they may say that, or why they may view Guild Wars 2 PvP in that way. The issue that I see with it is that in experience, in putting the time into the game mode, you'll find out that a lot of the game is actually pretty well balanced. Yes, there are some outliers, but there's outliers in every single patch that comes through. Generally speaking, in major updates across the board for Guild Wars 2, we usually see PvE getting updated and PvP being an afterthought. Now, luckily with Cal Cohen being kind of on point, we'll say, with a lot of the PvP updates, it seems that that's starting to rotate to be more of a forefront of what we should be focusing on in the game, which is to have as good class balance as we possibly can. And they've really started to divide up the changes in PvE versus PvP, which does nothing but benefit us, because now we are starting to have more class balances. Every class, every elite specialization has some type of role. They can do something in the game which is fantastic, and that is exemplified in PvP. And what we really see is the idea that your dual sword Condi Burst Zerker is still viable. There is a place where it can play. Now, having said that, in every patch update, in every balance schedule, there is a bit of fluctuation. Certain classes rise up, other classes don't really perform as well anymore. But the idea is that even though you have your unique build, you're still able to compete to some degree. Most of us won't reach that super high top tier PvP ranking where we're playing against the very, very best.
I say, hold up.
And in that case, that's where your personal build might not necessarily be as strong. And that's okay. That might have to transition into you playing some sort of meta build and then just being better. Now, that doesn't necessarily sit well with a lot of people. Personally, I'm like, no, I want to be my, weird Hammer Catalyst, which Hammer Catalyst, ironically, is very good. But the idea is that once you get to that top tier and into the higher rankings, certain builds will start to fall off, especially if they have glaring weaknesses or they can only do a single thing very well. And what I will stress is that most players won't ever even really care to reach that super high rank in ranked PvP. They won't care to fight against the very, very best in the game. Most players just want to be able to log in, play their normal games where they do 2 or 3 matches a night, and call it a day, even with their strange build and their unique playstyle. And that is the beautiful thing about Guild Wars 2 PvP, is that if you are efficient at your specific build in your specific class, you could do well. What do you think about the current state of Guild Wars 2 PvP? Tell me in the comment section down below. Okay, so this is something that kind of tags into the previous mentioned point, which is that Guild Wars 2 PvP doesn't necessarily receive the same kind of updates and we'll say facelifts that PvE or open world does. Now, before you guys start rattling off in the comments, I understand that there are certain changes that are implemented over time. More often than not, it is just simply class balancing. What I'm getting at, and something that has been brought to my attention, is that PvP doesn't necessarily get like a new map or a new game mode or something that changes up where we are at right now. Not in the same sense as like PvE, which every expansion, you get new maps, you get new raids, new strikes, new dungeons. Actually, no new raids. Scratch that. But the idea is that there hasn't been a new feature to Guild Wars 2 PvP. It's always just been kind of this thing that we realize is over there. We know that it's there, but we don't necessarily care to play it. And this is a barrier that is more specifically aimed at veteran players, especially if you've been playing the game for a while, you've gotten a piece or two of PvP legendary gear, and you're just not necessarily interested in it. There's nothing unique about it. There's nothing new that's drawing you back in. So a lot of veterans understand that PvP is there, and they might do it occasionally if they are after a certain piece of gear or they are looking to get some achievements. But most of them, if they can avoid it, they don't necessarily spend their time on it. And of course, the outliers being those who actually love Guild Wars 2 PvP and who just constantly put in hours and matches every single day. And this could be chalked up to maybe as a niche problem only affecting a few players versus the larger player mass. However, it is something to consider. And also doubling down on what Guild Wars 2 does very well, which is it's being a casual game. If it's a casual game, I know PvP is there. And I can go to it whenever I want to, but I don't have to. There's no urgency. There's nothing unique that needs me to be there right now to play it. I'll get to it when I can. And again, that's not necessarily the player's fault. Everyone wants to play the game and enjoy it the way that they want to. So, you know, if PvP isn't on their radar because it's not as exciting as they thought, or they don't even want to put their toes into competitive play, then there's more reasons barring why this player might not necessarily want to get back into PvP. Another sore area, and I will bring this up because occasionally we do see it, is the use of bots. Bots are essentially computer players, we'll say, who are basically programmed to just hang out and do specific things and follow a specific order. And a lot of the times, you'll see occasionally what they look like. They just kind of stand around. And yes, I know that this is something that has popped up a number of times about why players don't want to jump into Guild Wars 2 PvP. It is annoying, and this is unfortunately something outside of our hands unless ArenaNet gets their game together. But I do want to make mention that, yes, occasionally you will run into bots. But what this does mean is that there is some way that we can point those out by essentially just saying, hey, report these players because they are a bot. This person isn't responding. This person isn't playing. They're just essentially following order commands. And personally, I have seen a few bots across PvP matches, and it is a problem, I will say, and I would be lying to you if I said that it doesn't influence the outcome of the game. And kind of tying into player versus player is the idea of world versus world, because I consider player versus player, specifically world versus world, under the player versus player umbrella. There is a massively dedicated group of players, large group of players who log in, and essentially that's all they want to do is play world versus world and roam around and get into these castle sieges and do all these great things. And I know that for the longest time I was hesitant of joining world versus world because I didn't think that my gear was up to par. I didn't really realize what was going on or what I'm doing, what's important, how do these tracks work, you know, Where should we go? There were so many questions that I had to answer myself in World versus World to truly understand and appreciate the game mode, which, by the way, the game mode is freaking awesome. If you actually get a chance to play, World versus World is so much damn fun, and it's even funner, funner, if you have a group of players where you guys can all join together. It's fantastic. Highly recommend. And Arena has paid attention to this dedicated group of players. They understand that, yes, they want this game mode to change and be up to snuff. And it's great because they're looking to restructure some of the things that they have for World versus World, although it's taking like a year or something. Now, interestingly enough, PvP in Guild Wars 2 is one of the best ways to just get fantastic gear and items. That's one thing that I don't understand why players don't dip their toes more into it. So in Guild Wars 2 PvP, you can actually get legendary armor, straight across the board, legendary armor, as well as a legendary backpack, all just by playing the game mode. And now remember, legendary gear is essentially, once you have that legendary piece, you will never need a piece for that particular slot ever again.
Another one. Another one.
Now, the legendary armor, of course, is tied to those specific armor tiers, so heavy, medium, or light. You'll never need a light piece of armor ever again because you've already unlocked this PvP legendary. Their stats can be changed at will. You can change the look at them at will for free. I mean, it's really awesome. And then on top of that, if you don't even care about getting legendaries, you just want ascended gear, which is the same stat level. It's not as flexible as legendary gear, but you can earn that just by playing. And it's fairly simple. It's fairly straightforward. You can get the best gear in game really just by killing other players. And then on top of that, the PvP reward tracks can help you earn legendaries in other places within the game. Currently, I'm working on Vision, the legendary accessory from Living World Season 4, and I'm using Guild Wars 2 PvP to earn those pieces, so I don't have to do the masteries in any of those given zones. It's actually really efficient if you think about it, because you're now working on multiple pieces of legendary gear all at the same time. And that's really why I was trying to figure out why players don't want to spend as much time in this game mode. And after putting some thought into it, I realized that a lot of players only dip their toes into Guild Wars 2 PvP when it is a necessity, rather than actual enjoyment. If a player only needs we'll say, a gift of battle or a couple of mystic clovers, then they might jump into PvP, do what they need to, and then jump back out. So it kind of makes sense why, it might not be a regular favorite as most other game modes. Now, of course, I can appreciate this because I think of it in a utility sense. I look at Guild Wars 2 PvP as a means to an end, but I also enjoy just popping in for a game or two and seeing how well I can do. So looking at it from these different angles, I understand why players may be a little bit apprehensive. I love this damn game in Guild Wars 2, and I specifically love Guild Wars 2 PvP. Now, if you are interested in taking a look at some of the other content that I'll be putting out, make sure to like and subscribe this video so you can keep seeing more caffeinated content. And you knew if I was going to be talking about the state of Guild Wars 2 PvP, then you know damn well that I was going to talk about the toxicity within the PvP community. The behaviors of other players and other people towards each other in competitive game modes. I will be the first one to say that in every competitive game that I have ever played, there has been a certain form of toxicity. There have been people who are just absolutely mean for no reason.
It's only a game. Why you have to be mad?
Or they are having the worst day in the world and they want to take it out on you because you made a slight hiccup. And guess what? We're human, so we make mistakes, but it still happens. Now, of course, you do have the option of blocking players, and you do have the option of turning off chat completely. Those are viable things that you can do, and of course, I always recommend doing that if you need to. Because if you are going to be dealing with a toxic player and the easiest thing that you can do is block them, then block them. You don't have to listen to them. And of course, the other side of it is that when your team turns on you, where you guys were doing incredibly well and then something happens and the match has completely flipped. And now you are getting roasted by your own team because you may or may not have survived what they called an easy play. And I bring up these situations to explain that toxicity is a problem. And that is always going to be a problem in any type of competitive play. Absolutely. It's almost in that sense of human nature. That's an easy sum up for what a lot of people will say. And I do not excuse anything that they say as acceptable. It's a game. We're all here to enjoy it. So why the hell are you treating me any different? But having said that, it is an unfortunate eventuality that we cannot control other players' behaviors. We can only control how we react and how we deal with it. And this is one of the common problems that I see with Guild Wars 2 PvP. And this is something that a number of players have brought to my attention of why they don't even want to step into that game mode. Guild Wars 2 is meant to be a relaxing game, and if you are playing in this competitive game mode and you're not doing as well, a lot of players will add that almost insult to injury, or I shouldn't say a lot, but some. And I don't necessarily blame them. I play Guild Wars 2 for that same thought, is I want to relax, I want to chill, I just want to do what I want to do here in the game, and not necessarily be chastised. So I understand why players are apprehensive, but what I will say is that this is something that we definitely can fix. And every single player who watches this particular video, I want to stress to you, this is something that you can change. You are 100% in direct control of all of your actions. And yes, you may lose and you might have another player get upset at you. There's a simple block button and you'll never receive messages from that character again. And then on top of that, if someone else is having a bad day, and your Daredevil has gone 0-5 and lost to a Condi Scourge, it doesn't help to sit there and attack them while they're already probably feeling pretty crappy that they're not doing well in this game. Nobody wants to not do well. So instead of attacking them and saying, what the hell is your problem, or something along those lines, reach out and say, hey, you know, what's going on? How can I help? What do you need? Like, you'll be surprised at opening up the damn conversation of what you were capable of doing and how you were able to help players. It's absolutely amazing. It takes no time, and you'd be surprised at the reaction that you will get. I've personally done this, and I highly recommend it. Just ask. They might be a new player trying to figure out the game. At the end of the day, Guild Wars 2 PvP is one of my favorite game modes, and it's something that I recommend all players enjoying. It is so much fun. It's such a great experience, and you shouldn't necessarily shortchange yourself just because of what some other people might say. All right, so if you are interested in learning a little bit more about Guild Wars 2 PvP and how you can start, click this video here where I will show you the new player beginner's guide to getting into this great game mode. Stay caffeinated, folks.